I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and this is the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. I'm taking the taboos of menopause and perimenopause and bringing light to the dark. No bullshit, no shame. It's time for us to gain a new paradigm in female health, out with the old and in with the new, and I'm bringing fresh perspectives from someone in the arena. I've been practicing women's health for nearly 20 years, and I'm spilling the tea on what it means to live at midlife, knowing that the best is yet to come. I'm sharing my Gen X approach to living through this transition. Sassy, a bit sweary, and always honest. Tactical tips and instantly usable information is my aim. I hope to make you laugh and that you learn something new that helps you embrace the change. Together, we bring power to the peri. Onward to the podcast. Hello, listeners. Today's guest, I'm so excited to introduce you to Andrea Nakayama, functional medicine nutritionist and educator and podcaster of the 15-Minute Matrix. And you know, this was a really fun conversation for me because Andrea was one of my early teachers in podcasting, and somewhere in the middle of my functional medicine practice, she came online and reminded me of some really, really important, very fundamental things about health that we forget, and that medicine 2.0 doesn't always do a great job of checking the box on. And so it was just lovely to have this beautiful conversation with Andrea. And she and I, right from the start, she started teaching me. Literally the first thing she talked about was about anemia. And as you know, as a listener of the show, this is something I talk about a lot on the show. I talk about it with patients because it is such a, what's the right way to say it? It's just something that gets quite ignored in women's medicine, and it doesn't need to be. And so Andrea dropped some info, and I was, oh my God, I'm learning from her already. It's so great. So I'm so excited for you to listen to the show. We talk about many, many things, but really about precision medicine and the approach of precision medicine. When we consider the bioindividuality of all of us, it really makes a difference. We're not all the same. First of all, women aren't little men, and age changes things, and gender changes things, and our communities and our societies, that all changes things that need to be considered when you're looking at how to keep yourself healthy for your entire life. We do speak about longevity. And I asked Andrea, is longevity the flex from menopause? Because I certainly think it is. That's why I'm talking about it a lot on the show. I want to know way more about how I'm going to live as long as I can, as healthy as I can. And as my listeners, I hope you're coming along with me on that journey. Please allow me to introduce my guest today, Andrea Nakayama. She's a functional medicine nutritionist and educator who has led thousands of clients and now teaches even more coaches and clinicians around the world in a revolution, reclaiming ownership of both their own and their clients' health. As the host of the 15-Minute Matrix podcast and the founder and former CEO of Functional Nutrition Alliance, Andrea draws on systems biology, mental models, root cause methodology, and the therapeutic partnership to offer long-awaited solutions for the rapidly growing chronic illness epidemic. After losing her young husband to a brain tumor in 2002, she discovered a passion for using food as personalized medicine and is now regularly consulted as the nutrition expert for the toughest cases clinically in practices of many world-renowned doctors. She trains nearly 4,000 practitioners each year in her methodologies so that they too can become the last stop for their clients and patients, as well as a trusted referral partner for doctors in their area. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed being a part of it. Thank you for listening to the show. Now listen to my episode, my interview, my discussion with Andrea Nakayama. AG1, the way I start my healthy days. With my AG1, I get a daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre and probiotics, adaptogens, and more. It's daily self care for my busy life. It helps me fill the nutrition gaps, supports immune health, and supports gut for healthy digestion. It's once a day, easy to drink, and packed with bioavailable ingredients in a convenient formula. I am proud to have had AG1 as a sponsor of this show for many years. It's a nutritional supplement I stand behind and I take every single day. Start with AG1 and notice the difference for yourself. It's a great first step to investing in your health. Try AG1 and get a free bottle of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/Fiona Lovely. That's a $48 value for free if you go to drinkag1.com/Fiona Lovely. Check it out. Welcome to the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Andrea Nakayama, who was one of my early teachers in functional medicine. She doesn't know it yet, but she's about to find out. Andrea, thank you for coming to the show.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here with you. I'm super excited.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we have a lot of parallels in our lives, and of course I know because I've read your bio. So let's share. Actually, you lived in Boulder, Colorado for a time, didn't you?
My parents did, but in Colorado, but I didn't live in Boulder.
Okay.
Did you live in Boulder?
My first practice was in Boulder,
actually.
actually.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, and so my husband's from Colorado. He's from Fort Collins. And I'm Canadian as they get, so I'm up here in Calgary. But I remember when I started the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast, I recorded the first episodes in 2005, and I dropped the first episodes in early 2006. And my cat's going to join us.
Mine might join us too. She might be right here yawning in our faces.
They just love it, don't they? They love it. Anyways, he's okay. So when I started the show, there was nobody else talking about menopause. I was the first one in that space. And I was about 10 episodes in, and I thought I'd never even listened to another podcast. Like, I had no idea what it even was. I just figured it was like an online lecture. So I was just teaching, And I remember coming across your podcast, The 15-Minute Matrix, at some point shortly after I started the show. So am I right? Am I out to lunch? What do you remember what year you started it?
Yeah, it was a little while ago, but not maybe that early. You might have started podcasting before me, before I started the 15-Minute Matrix, but I was well into my practice and my teaching, and the Functional Nutrition Alliance was well underway. So there were probably a lot of webinars that were functioning like podcasts way back when you started. But I think you might have started podcasting before me, but I will say I am a podcast junkie. Audio is my jam. So really the whole platform of podcasting, the way of consuming information is something I really, really resonate with. So I'm glad you're podcasting and started early adopter.
Thank you. I didn't even know what I was doing. It's crazy. All these years later, here we are. We're still doing it. Anyways, I remember one of the early episodes of the 15-Minute Matrix I heard from you, which was on the subject of anemia and iron deficiency. And I was like, whoa, nobody's talking about this in the women's healthcare space. This is huge.
Huge.
So huge, as you know, because you see clients yourself, yes?
Just a little bit now, but my team sees clients. I'm mostly teaching and turning my work more towards writing and facilitating and leading different kinds of opportunities. So only a few clients left, but my team sees clients. Yes. But I'm still very in touch with the client realm through my team and I'm training thousands of students a year. So they're bringing case studies, keeps me fresh as a clinician.
Yes, no kidding. And of course, you're going to see that anemia thing come up all the time.
Yes, yes, so many times. And the anemia, I think if we get to the essence of things, really comes back to some foundational practices. It's going to happen in menopause, but one of the things we can really think about is dehydration and the impacts of hydration on our red blood cell function, and then how that can over time start to appear as anemia or the symptoms of anemia like fatigue. And so it's really interesting for me when we start to make these full body systems connections and see we don't have to get hyper fixated on the fix. We can get down to what I like to think of as the first principles. What's the essence of what I need to focus on before I go seeking all the different pills and protocols and potions and practitioners that are going to help
Well,
me?
and this is what functional medicine does. We look at the root cause of things and we say, how can we correct it? I had a patient in the office yesterday who couldn't get in to see me for low back pain for a couple of weeks, so she went to see her GP. And her GP said, don't go to the chiropractor, that'll make it worse, but here's some pills, take them until you don't need them anymore. And so the patient comes in who trusts me and says, was that the right thing to do? I said, no, you do whatever you want, of course. But, these are the choices we have. First of all, medicine doesn't understand what chiropractors do. They don't really understand what nutritionists do either. They
Right.
certainly don't understand what functional medicine is. So what I said to the patient, and I say it often on the show, is if you take your Ford to the Maserati dealership, they'll say, yes, I can fix it. Of course I can
Yeah.
advise you. It's got 4 wheels and a windshield and an engine, of course. But it's a totally different lens with which we look at the biology of being human. And
Yes.
it's a funny thing, you're still teaching because I just learned something new from you, and we're what, 10 minutes in? So hydration as part of the anemia landscape.
Yeah, I see this a lot. So if I'm looking at somebody's labs, and I love looking at serum labs, I'm not the biggest fan of the fancy pantsy functional labs. There's a time and a place for them, but I think
Agreed.
they're way overused these
Agreed.
days. But if I'm looking at somebody's regular old serum labs and I can see the connections, what I like to think of as the constellation, when there is anemia, I am often seeing a few different things that include dehydration, and I can see that in their red blood cell markers in their CBC with differentials. So their complete blood count is going to have their red blood cells, and I can often see an elevation in the thickness or in its transport that makes me say, how's your hydration? And they'll be like, funny you should ask. And it's a first place for us to look. If we just think about it very practically, getting the water that our body needs helps the blood to flow. The blood flowing gets where it needs to go. There's a lot of benefits we have from that. And there's different reasons why people restrict their water. If they're on their feet a lot, teachers restrict their water. If we have any incontinence issues, if we're experiencing waking up in the middle of the night, there's a lot of reasons people start restricting their water intake, and it can be a huge factor, as can stomach acid and different things. But I think getting back to the core principle that you spoke to in functional medicine, we should, and I say should because not every functional practitioner does this, but we should be asking, why is this happening? Not just what do I do about it?
Agreed. I absolutely agree. I remember years and years ago you saying the term personalized medicine and thinking, that's totally new. Let's talk about that. What does that mean to you? And share your teaching on that, please.
Yeah, so I have a mantra that pertains to any work I do anywhere. And that mantra is everything is connected, we are all unique, and all things matter. Everything is connected is what we've been talking about, that systems biology, or like I think of it, the full body systems, which is the name of my training program, right? So we understand the gut brain connection, the hormones are connected to detoxification, which is connected to the gut. Like we understand that. But that's everything is connected. We are all unique, brings us back to this idea of bioindividuality. individuality and the idea of making our care personalized, understanding an individual's factors throughout their life, their history. In functional medicine, we call them the ATMs, the antecedents, what came with you, the triggers, what's happened in your lifespan that brings you here today, and the mediators, what helps you feel better, what makes you feel worse. So in the realm of medical care and what's happening with the evolution of the science of actual medicine, there is precision medicine, and precision medicine helps us really direct the care to the individual based on what we know about their genetic makeup. Genes are proving to be more limiting than we originally thought in what could be precision care, but the two areas we're seeing it really have the biggest effect are in cancer care and in mental health practices. So we're seeing a lot of pharmacogenomics come into play in those two areas. But the way I like to think about it isn't based on the genes, it's based on the epigenome, the person's life and all the factors that have influenced them to date. So my understanding of the individual beyond what they have makes it personalized nutrition or personalized medicine. And I just want to speak to that specifically because I'm talking theoretically right now. If somebody has pre-diabetes or has been diagnosed with diabetes, and we think on some realm that the dietary theory includes a ketogenic diet or intermittent fasting, it's my job to know that that's theory, but I have an individual in front of me. If that person has a history with disordered eating, if they don't have a gallbladder, if they've had issues with food restriction or food rules in the past in any way, that is something I need to understand. Do they have difficulty digesting fats that they can tell me about based on their poop? I need to say the theory is the theory. That dietary theory is not pertaining to what will help this individual in a personalized way unless I understand the person who has the diagnosis and not just the diagnosis. So for me, personalized medicine is really understanding the person. And I think we've gotten really far away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the hospitals, it's protocolized.
Yes.
So you check boxes, right?
Yes.
And this is where I think we can get swept into something that we may not wish to have without really understanding what's happening. I've seen it in my own life with family members. I've had so many guests on the show that have been part of the medical system in North America and have said, yeah, that's exactly what happens. It's just check boxes. Okay. It's flow charts and workflows and that sort of thing. Actually, I had a patient yesterday tell me that they had a very old school doctor who did like a whole body exam every year. And she said, she just retired. I said, oh, you're not going to find somebody like that anymore. They
Mm-hmm.
just don't really exist anymore.
No. Yeah. And I think just to anchor on what you're talking about, my introduction to the field of even being a healthcare practitioner was when my late husband, Isamu, was diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was 7 weeks pregnant. This is back in April of 2000. And I wasn't in the field. I had a passion for food and for cooking, but I wasn't a practitioner at that point. And we entered into the system, the medical system, and we were in one of the best places to address a brain tumor. The UCSF in San Francisco is one of the top brain tumor centers in the country, and they were amazing. However, I noticed the first gaps that I started to encounter in the medical system, and those first two gaps speak to what you're talking about. Number one, everybody is treated like their diagnosis. So you are your diagnosis. And number two, everybody with the same diagnosis is treated the same, which is that protocol thinking that you're talking about. And for me, coming from outside of the system, being in our early 30s, still being naive. We didn't have much encounter with traditional medicine until that point. So we went from like 0 to 90, basically. I was shocked that my soulmate, this man who was about to be a father, was my husband, my lover, a brother, a son, a software developer, a musician, a passionate eater. All of these things was treated like a glioblastoma multiforme. He was treated like his diagnosis. People would talk about him like that. And I was just like, what's going on? So this notion of personalized medicine has real meaning to me. But like you, I've seen it happen repeatedly to people where their symptoms are protocolized and they're given a set of things to do based on signs, symptoms, or diagnoses. And then they're left to be in the figuring it out on their own. And oftentimes those things don't work. So I just wanted to ground in like the very personal, movement for me or mission that came from like, wait a minute, this isn't a protocol. He's not a glioblastoma. He's Isamu who has a glioblastoma.
Mm-hmm. And you said that was 2000, 2001?
That was 2000 when he was diagnosed. He died in 2002.
And yet, I don't think it's gotten better. I think the system has gotten even more
Yes.
protocolized. And I think
Yes.
really it comes down to, I mean, we can speculate on why these things happen, but I suspect it has to do with policy and profit, as things often do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a lot going on in the wellness industry, and I don't love the term because I think it is an industry where commodification is the goal. And I just read this quote this week from Arthur Frank, and he wrote, "Commodification is a crucial aspect of the deconstruction of mortality. As long as I can buy this to fix that, I sustain an illusion of permanence." And I
Oh,
just think, right?
wow.
If I can buy this to fix that, I sustain the illusion of permanence. And I think this is what's happened in functional medicine as well. It's become an industry that's all about the test, the pill, the nutraceutical, the dietary theory, and we've lost the personalization. And I think people are feeling demonized themselves in their ability to quote unquote comply. And I think compliance isn't a personal issue of the patient. I think it's an issue of the commodification and the expectation that we are all going to be disciplined in a very particular way. That's the responsibility of the practitioner and
Yes.
the industries we support with all the things we're promoting.
Yes, certainly. And where I see it show up in clinic is patients will say to me, my doctor says, my blood hypertension, my cancer, my diabetes, my anxiety. And I always say, stop, it's not yours. Do not identify with the diagnosis. That is something you're experiencing at this point. Now, whether you continue to experience it or not, we don't know at this point, but we've embraced it as a community. We've embraced that terminology, and we just say, well, okay, well, this is what happens. Like your late husband was treated as a glioblastoma, which, devastating, right?
Yeah.
Devastating.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to pick up that you have just talked about is the lab situation, and I'll just sort of reveal my own thoughts on it. Having done functional lab testing since probably about 2000 was when I did my first one, I got really hip really fast to the fact that they all kind of looked the same. And then these big fancy P tests came out, and they cost 3 times as much. And I did a couple of those, but the patients and I were both frustrated about we didn't really understand what was happening. They're very complex reports. And I stopped doing those really fast. And I'm at the point now where I'm like you, I look at the serum. I mean, I'm in Canada, so my patients in clinic, we can generally have the doctor draw blood and take a look at things. But it was Dr. Christiane Northrup who years ago, she was really the only one talking about menopause for a very long time. And she said, look, it's there's a pattern to perimenopause. So if you know what to look for, you don't necessarily have to have the testing. So I'm with you. I think tests are dare I say, they're part of the commodity of
They certainly are, and I think there's this idea that we will find the root, and I will always say there is no one root. If we're having unresolved signs and symptoms, there are always, I call it three roots, which brings us down to that first principles thinking, the essence of where we have to go. But I think it's this idea that we're going to find something, treat it. It's again this idea, if I find the one thing, I fix that, all will be better. It's this desire for restitution and the quick fix that we are all seeking. And I get it. I get that we want that, but the test isn't going to take us there. It's going to take our money away from where it might be able to, we might be able to spend it otherwise. But I also think there's this idea that people who don't like the tests don't know how to read them. And I do know how to read the tests. I just don't find that they're actually useful unless I need them to take something forward, right? So I'm not going to test anything I don't need until I need it. So if I need
yes.
additional information because I'm not able to bring in more recommendations or there's not more work to do, sure, I need to get more refined data, but there isn't a need for what happens typically in a lot of practices these days where a lot of testing is done up front. So I think the question is, when I get this test, what am I going to do with it? And what's happening, going back to our idea of the protocol ideas, we're actually protocolizing what we're seeing on those functional tests, which makes no sense.
Mhm.
I also just want to say the evidence behind a lot of these tests is a pretty iffy. And I think there's a time and a place for the notion of evidence and how we embrace it these days. We do need to think about correlative information, not just causative, but they're being used as causative for treatment. And that is not what they are about. And I think we're just mistaken and misguided, and I am on my soapbox, with the way that we are using functional testing when there's so much gross information we can gather from those regular old serum labs that gives us a picture
Yes.
along with somebody's health history and signs and symptoms that gets us closer to the finish line, maybe over the finish line,
Yes.
without having to go there.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so what do you do then? Because this is not just a practitioner problem, if we're going to call it that. Because quite often
Oh, yeah.
I will have patients
Yeah.
say to me, "Oh, I need the testing because I'm
Yes.
not going to stop eating wheat until I see the testing that says." And I was like, "Well, listen, first of all, you could spend a pile of money on these food allergy tests, which are iffy at best." Exactly. And what it's going to end up doing, I've seen it time and time again, because I'll say, no, it's not a good idea. Save your money, take that $500 and put it into your investments, whatever. But they'll go and somebody else will give it to them. And then they bring it back to me and say, how do I interpret this? And I say, you don't. You
Yeah.
do the food elimination that you think is going on and you see what happens. Like that's the
Yes.
best way to do it. But there are just some people that are saying, I need to see the evidence.
Yeah, and this is again that commodification, right? The testing companies are in front of us in media and social media. The supplement companies are in front of us. They're feeding us all this information. I mean, what's so fascinating, I just have to say as an aside, is we have more information available to us than ever before, more than our mothers, right? We have
Yeah.
more information, and yet more
Yes.
people are sick and not getting better. So what do we make of this paradigm that we're in where there's more information and yet more problems and less resolution of the problems? So I think that the point you bring up is a really good one in terms of what do we think it's going to take for ourselves to be able to get over that finish line or to finally feel better, and where do we think we need data and what kind of data do we need? So this is where I have a conversation about quantitative data, that report that shows that wheat's a problem, and qualitative quantitative data, the elimination diet. Let's give it a try. Let's see how you feel. The way somebody feels in their body and being able to own that as a mediator, getting back to our antecedents, triggers, and mediators. I know this makes me feel better. This makes me feel worse. That's a much better motivator than the scale, a piece of paper, all these things outside of ourselves, because the gauge is internal. I actually see that as my job. If I can help you understand more of your mediators from a somatic sense, a felt sense, not a piece of paper or somebody said sense, that's where you're going to make the biggest difference in your long-term health goals. Then you're in charge. You have the agency of risk reward, right? Like, I know it doesn't feel good when I go to sleep past 10:30, but I'm up with friends tonight. It's worth it. I'm taking the risk, right? Like, that's my decision, even though I know that mediator. The other thing I want to say about these tests is they exist in a context. And this is something a lot of patients cannot fully understand. So if we look at foods as an example, we can think about allergies, we can think about sensitivities, and we can think about intolerances. These tests aren't going to tell us which of those things might be going on, and they might tell us that one of those isn't going on for various reasons, but another one is. So as an example, I can think about dairy, and if somebody is lactose intolerant, they're having a digestive issue that isn't going to show up on a sensitivity test because they're having necessarily, it might, but we don't know for sure. And the other thing is, when we look at sensitivities, those are a part of our immune system that might be elevated or depressed altogether. So they exist in a context where if we're only looking at that specific information, we don't understand, oh, wheat didn't show up. Oh, I have no idea that my entire adaptive immune system is repressed. All my antibodies are repressed, so it's not showing up. So we don't understand the context as patients that information exists in, and we're taking it out of that context and misinterpreting it. Does that make sense, do you think, to the audience? Okay.
Yes, and I think so. And I think people are in a rush to get to the problem,
Quick
to
fix.
fix the problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, we've got this background running of not trusting ourselves.
Yes.
Most of us having some kind of trauma that we've experienced in our lives, because who hasn't? And we lose the sense, that intuitive sense of this feels well, this doesn't feel well. And so it's like it's a bit of a nasty soup to be standing in, right? And it's ripe for going down the wrong path. And to come back to the food allergy test, quite a few years ago now, I had a patient that insisted on the food allergy test. I said, I don't feel, I find somebody else. And she did. And then she brought the test back to me and said, so in the tests, I don't know, I can't remember, 200 different foods, common foods or something like that. She said, I've eliminated everything on the test that showed up as sensitive. And I said,
Totally.
so you're consuming air and water, basically?
Yeah.
She goes, yeah, and I don't feel any better. I said, yeah, pardon me, but I told you so.
Yes. Yes. And this is a problem. This is conditioned food hypersensitivity. We get this information.
Yeah.
We over-identify. Two things happen. We over-identify with it and we take it as gospel, or we reject it completely and we then don't believe that anything related to food can help us. And what I've seen in the evolution of my work is people who have done all the things, they've done all the diets, all the tests, all the supplements, and they're still not better, and they're angry. And I appreciate that anger, because what has been done to that person is, in my opinion, unethical, not personalized, and not sustainable. And I don't want to put people on a diet, and I don't want them spending their life savings on supplements or tests.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want us to find a way to allow the body to heal. If we're sick or we have something like an autoimmune condition, we do have to manage things a bit. However, there is a way to do that without over indexing on all the different things we have to be doing and then either failing because we can't keep it up or getting so restrictive that we start, like your air and water patient, to develop new signs and symptoms because of nutrient deficiencies.
Yes, and as you and I both know, physical things, psychological problems or mental problems, the trauma bit, if we're not managing that, it will show up as physical symptoms. And you can throw every diet, every supplement, every test at that, and nothing's going to take care of that. Boo, you have to get in there and heal the trauma, right? I know, exactly. Exactly. This is so many of us right now. And it's a real skill to be able to feel what your body needs and what makes you feel strong, what makes you feel healthy. And what I want my listeners to take away from everything that Andrea is saying is you don't need to seek out the most expensive practitioner in town because you're assuming that the most expensive practitioner is the one that's going to do the best job. Let's talk about stress for a minute. Stress isn't just hard on your mental health, it's also expensive for your biology. If you're dealing with chronic stress, you may want to take a good mineral supplement. Because it turns out when you're constantly stressed, your body burns through a lot more minerals than usual. Chronic daily stress depletes magnesium, potassium, selenium, zinc, and more. Even worse, those mineral deficiencies make future stress hit you harder. If you want to break the cycle of chronic stress, you have to replenish your mineral stores. Minerals make you more resilient to the negative effects of stress, helping you get back on your feet. That's why I love Beam Minerals. Beam makes things easy. You just take a capful of concentrated, mineral-rich liquid each morning. It tastes like water, and it gives you every essential mineral your body needs to deal with the stress in the right ratios with high bioavailability. I've been using Beam for a while now. You'll feel it working within days. You'll have way more energy, and you'll be amazed by the difference it makes for your stress levels. Give Beam a try. Head to beamminerals.com. That's BEAMMINERALS.com and use the code LOVELY for 20% off your first order. Thanks, Beam. Right here in town, we have a functional medicine doctor who is charging $100,000 for the Bredesen protocol. Okay.
Whoa.
Yes, so I have that training as well. I give that information away for free. I'm not saying that's right, but somewhere in the middle is probably a good idea. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that are pulling money out of their retirement to do that to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia, even though we don't know. And what is it? It's very, very testing heavy. So what I want the listeners to take away is what Andrea is teaching us is that once you tune into your body and what your body needs, all the wisdom is there. There's not an outside test that's going to give us in every case. Anyways, there'll be some cases that the testing makes sense, as you said, but I absolutely concur with you.
Yeah, and I want to get back to, I love what you're saying, and I want to get back to that idea of everything is connected, we're all unique, and all things matter. And to me, this is the functional nutrition matrix, and the 15-minute matrix, my podcast, is based on that matrix. So in the center is that everything is connected. This is all our signs and symptoms and diagnoses. Owie, I don't feel good, right? Everything is connected. And that's where we tend to focus our attention. But we are all unique and all things matter flank that center portion that everything is connected. So bear with me here. There are three areas. We have the center, which is our physiology and where we're in all the internal feels, the pains, the strains, the it doesn't feel good. On the left is that personalized piece of we are all unique, the antecedents, the triggers, and the mediators. And those triggers are those traumas, big T, little t, that we've experienced. We might not be able to fix the trauma, but sitting with and recognizing that the trauma does live in, flank, and influence that physiological physiological terrain is an important connection for us to make. On the other side of that is all things matter. And this is where I want to bring it back to the patient, right? I just want to say sleep and relaxation matter. Exercise and movement matter. Nutrition and hydration matter. Stress and resilience matter. Relationships and networks matter. And when we focus our attention where we have the room between our doctor's visits, in our everyday, we actually do make a difference on the physiology. I can tell you from my physiological understanding as an advanced clinician that your sleep impacts your microbiome, that your stress impacts your microbiome, that those two things impact your hormones. So instead of jumping to what I call the soup, that internal area, stay in the skill. Do your skill, see what 2.0 feels like for you. Experiment. It's not about being perfect. Again, come down to the essence, the core. I might say, like, it's not about meditating for 20 minutes a day and seeing whether you can and then calling yourself a failure if you can't. It's about downshifting. Did I downshift today? Did I have a moment to downshift? Was it when I was washing dishes or listening to this podcast and folding the laundry or walking the dog? Check. Good girl. I am taking care of my skills to help my body to come into its restoration. And I think we've lost the different pieces of the puzzle that I'm bringing together to say, yes, it's about tuning in and tune into what makes sense for you to do, boo, as you said. You do you, boo. Like
Yes.
you find your do you, boo. It's not about me telling you the prescription. It's about you finding where am I right now? What would I like to work on? What would give me joy and pleasure so that I'm not tracking everything, worrying about everything? That's not helpful I mean, it's necessary at certain points in the journey, but it also needs to be balanced with some other sense of living and life.
I love what you've just said, and I'm extrapolating it into my own world. I'm a woman
Please.
that loves lists. Give me a to-do list. I loved it. It feels like an accomplishment to check shit off.
Totally.
It's probably the Virgo in my chart, but that's another conversation. So and I know there's a lot of women that are like that too, men as well, but primarily I work with women. And I think there's a part of the testing and all of that. I got to have the proof that comes down to that whole, well, I've got to make a list. I got to check it off. There's a workflow, there's a protocol that I have to follow. But actually what you've just said in my own brain's interpretation is set that aside, go over here to the things you know you need to do on a regular basis. And you called it the downshift. What a beautiful way to say it. I love that. And I hope I'm not the only one that totally enjoys laundry. To me, laundry is a downshift. My husband thinks that's nuts, which is good. It's a good combination.
Yes.
Folding laundry and making everything perfect little piles just it feeds the soul.
Good. Yes, that's how I feel about cooking. Some people are like, I'll cook my boyfriend his meals for lunch for the entire week. And some people are like, why do you do on the weekend? Because we only see each other on the weekend. And people are surprised by that. But I get so much joy and relaxation out of making things and making food and nourishing. Like that is joyful to me. But if that isn't your joy, fold laundry, go for a walk, read a book, listen to a podcast, take a bath.
Yes, all the goodies. Yes, in this house, I do the laundry. My husband does the cooking. It works out pretty well.
Love that.
But yeah, it is handy. So the things that you mentioned over here again, sleep and rest,
Yes, sleep and
hydration.
relaxation,
Yes.
exercise and movement,
Yeah.
nutrition and hydration,
Yeah.
stress and resilience,
Yeah.
relationships and networks. And those are going to mean different things to all of us. If we go to relationships, I'm not a very social person. My work is very, very social and engaged, even though I'm sitting in my house interacting with people on Zoom. I'm over interacting in my everyday for my personal makeup. So I don't need a lot of time socializing. So I just want to say, when we say relationships and networks, it's about tuning in to what is the right equation for me. Just like when I say exercise and movement, for somebody that might be weightlifting and CrossFit, and I'm going to dance class 4 times a week, right? Because I am having fun. And I think like it's just you finding your version of each of those things and doing the tune in. And I just want to bring it back to another way I look at it is what I call the non-negotiable trifecta, which is sleep, poop, and blood sugar balance, particularly for our hormones. But that relates as well. Like, how do I tune in? Oh, I noticed my poop's a little off today. I'm not going to obsess about it. I'm going to think, what I eat today? I didn't eat a lot of fiber. Interesting. Now, oh, interesting. I haven't been eating grains, but I did have some quinoa, and wow, I had a really great poop. Like, just allow that information to be a way that you're playing with life instead of following this scripture that has nothing to do with us as individuals.
Yes. So for the women listening that either don't have access to a practitioner or it's the resources, whether it's time or money or whatever, follow the checklist that Andrea just gave us. Nice. Andrea. Oh,
Andrea,
there we
you
go.
got it. Yeah.
Like mitochondria.
Like mitochondria.
I love that. So follow that checklist, because if you are taking better care of those categories, chances are you're going to take care of 80% of what's actually going on,
1,000%.
if not more. If not
Yes.
more. So
Yes.
health doesn't have to cost us more money, and it may require an reallocation of our time, which is okay. But it can be the simplest thing. For me, I always think about how my grandparents lived on the farm, where the food was pulled out of the ground, or the farmer down the road had the cattle, or somebody else had the chickens and the eggs. And they didn't have fancy computers and things like this. They lived a very different life. And because I spent so much time with them, I didn't and they passed when I was in my 20s. uh, I got to really absorb that lifestyle. And I always sort of go back to that in my, what would my grandma do? She'd go out into the garden, right? She'd let the sun on her skin. She'd go out and find something purposeful to do. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It really doesn't. Like you said, we've got more information available to us than any other time in history that we're aware of. And yet we're not better off for it.
And we've left the information that's within us behind on the shelf. I call it the pharmacy within, right? Like, we've forgotten the pharmacy within in favor of all the other things that are being offered to us. So we have more information available to us externally, but we've lost touch with the internal wisdom.
So it's self-trust is the thing we have to cultivate, give ourselves permission to trust the doctor inside, the pharmacy inside, the spiritual guide inside. I mean, all of those things are available to us, but we've been taught to focus on the stuff that's outside. There's got to be a better outside answer. And I love that reminder. Okay, I'm going to pivot a little bit here. By the way, I wrote that down. Left the info inside of us behind. That's going to show up on my social media from you. That's great. That's great. Okay, we're going to talk about longevity, because you and I seem to be both moving that direction in our work, which I find it's such an interesting time. I've been talking about menopause for a very long time, since before I was in my own menopause. And now, as I sort of close the chapter on peri-menopause soon, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't graduated yet.
I will welcome you in when it happens.
Wonderful. I know. All these beautiful, wise women that just did exactly what you just did. It's like, come join us, sister. We're having a good time. I love it. I love it. So The longevity piece is interesting because I don't think, first, I just want to acknowledge how I think Peter Attia was the first time I heard it said, moving from health, medicine 2.0 to medicine 3.0. And of course, he's a traditionally trained MD, so he's going to be talking about the protocols and these sorts of things. But to pay attention to not just how long we're living, but how healthy we're living longer. And so that's how I understand longevity. And to me, it feels like the next step after we've talked about menopause.
Ooh.
So I know. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on longevity, please.
Yeah, well, I am really thinking of longevity as an umbrella that we can think into to ask a different set of questions. Like you said, it's not about living longer, it's about living well when we're living. I also think that the longevity story is a curious one to me because we can't write it, we can't control it. It is a chaos narrative. We do not know how it's going to unfold in terms of aging, if we're to equate aging and longevity. And I think, again, the commodification and the industry that is promoting the idea that we can control it becomes very sexy and seductive. And so for me, I'm looking to flip longevity on its head. How do we get into that tune in with ourselves that you and I have been talking about so far to understand what's meaningful to me? And what is the essence we can gather from a lot of different literature that brings us back to our own scripture, our own protocol, and think about, let's say, purpose. I mean, purpose is one thing that is really been studied as part of longevity, that we continue to have purpose even as we age, which isn't easy when culture might kind of spit us out at a certain age. And I believe, like I think you do as well, as sort of, I'm on the high side of the Gen Xers. I think we are a population of women who are facing a reality that's never been faced in the way we are facing it. So if we listen to podcasts like Wiser Than Me with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she's talking to women in their late 70s and 80s who paved the way for today's everyday women. We did it all in whatever that looked like, and we are all facing a new reality. And so what I'm seeing is there's an opportunity for us to say it's not about the face cream and the supplements and the diet and the doing all the things. It's about a different essence of what that means to me. What does living well as I age mean to me and to you? And those may be different things. And how do we get to the core of that to rewrite the longevity story? It's not the patriarchal commodified story. It is not what has been faced before us. We are facing something new. We are more aware. We are more emboldened. And yet we are also kind of being spit out of the culture in a way that I think is new and surprising to an entire generation of women who, I don't know, I think were wise and brilliant and creative and still
Gorgeous.
have gorgeous and still have more to give and love. And
Oh,
I want to figure out what is that. And I think we show up for the seduction of longevity, but there's a lot that's within us that's going to rewrite that script. That was a long answer because I feel like I'm still forming my opinion on, wait a minute, something's not right here. Let's own this.
yes. So you've just put into words a lot of the things I've been feeling about it too. So thank you for that. And by the way, my listeners right now are going, well, thank God Fiona wasn't the first one to bring up the patriarchy in this episode. So it's just fine. There's a lot of shit disturbing that happens on this this podcast. I should have told you that.
Because I can curse like a sailor.
Perfect.
Sailor and really cute skirt.
Yes, you are. I love it. The wisdom that the elders have to share with us through the podcast, like Julia Louis Dreyfus's podcast. I loved her episode with Jane Fonda. So good. I mean, Jane's like sort of the OG of sharing wisdom. Anyways, that is what has been missing for our communities is that deep motherly wisdom of experience. And as I was listening to you speak, I could have just wept. It was so beautiful the way you said these, we just something's not right here. We're kind of, and when you said chewed up and spit out, I thought maybe you didn't say chewed up. You said getting spit out. I thought we are, and I'm like, hold on a minute.
Exactly.
Well,
Well, you just hold on a minute.
hold my handbag.
Hold on.
So this is just a little anecdote from my life. At the beginning of the year, I love HGTV. Like I could watch, that's like porn for me. I could watch design shows and the Food Network,
Love
same
that.
thing, right?
Yes.
There's nothing political there. There's no drama. It's just gentle. Let's make things pretty and taste good. Like this is the thing. At the beginning of this year, somebody at the network decided to rebrand both to a Food Channel and HGTV to a different name and totally different programming.
Mm.
And our generation is all but absent from
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of the late 20s and early 30s doing
Mm-hmm.
their starting projects. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, what? Okay, who made this shit decision?
Mm-hmm. You just wait. I have a whole new idea brewing to address this. You're just seeing the beginnings of a whole new empire. We need our empire.
Yes. And so then we end up going. So I found myself going to find the American version of HGTV, which is still there. It's available on Discovery in Canada. So I've been watching it. All the shows I love, Ina Garten and these sorts of things.
Yes,
I could just,
Ina.
I
She was
was.
on Wiser Than Me too.
Oh, see, I
Alice
haven't heard
Waters,
that.
Ina Garden. Yeah, those are a
Ooh,
couple of my
okay.
favorites.
I
Yeah.
need to listen to
Nina
that.
Totenberg.
Okay, okay. Thank you for giving me the checklist. But here's the thing. Whoever made those decisions has underestimated us.
Oh,
And
yes.
perfect. That's all we need to show up and say, hold my beer, hold my handbag, hold my coffee, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
So I'm interested to see the evolution of what happens. And those were kind of like the last two shows I was watching on cable TV. So now I'm just going to cancel my cable TV. Because why? Why am I
Yeah.
keeping it?
Yes, we need that. That's a downshift opportunity for you where you were just feeling the good feels and getting into
Folding laundry,
exactly, exactly.
watching the shows on TV, folding laundry. Anyways,
Yes.
so I am personally loving being this in this era of wisdom emerging and watching how society is managing that. By the way, I was going to share another story. Here in Canada, we had our national news anchor was a lady by the name of Lisa Laflamme for many, many, many years. She was great, and then she decided to let her hair go gray around the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic.
There's
Mm-hmm.
something.
Exactly. Exactly. I've got them
It's
too.
happening. I'm going. I'm going. It's happening.
It's gorgeous. And she was fired.
Yep.
And it came out that, Bell Media, who was in charge of that, there was somebody, a man in his 30s that ultimately made that decision. So, I think about, I'm like, okay, I know exactly.
Hold
Now she's
on.
gone on to do some other cool things, but basically she was sort of just let go.
Yeah.
And yet our news anchor for a lot of years was a old and wise man in his 80s with gray hair,
Yeah.
very
Of course.
distinguished looking.
Of
So,
course.
there's that double standard, etc. It's still out there. We
Yeah.
we get to dive into those pockets and
Mm-hmm.
say, just a minute now.
Yes.
I'm your mother. Have you forgotten?
Exactly.
and we're
Exactly.
and we're entering that cool grandma age too, which is kind of fun.
Yes.
Anyways. Okay, so I love what you said about longevity. This is the thing we can start to look forward to as women and say, we can do the things, but what I love about the longevity wisdom is it's not so much the health stuff, it's
Mm-mm.
the purpose, it's
Mm-hmm.
connection and community. It's
Mm-hmm.
the are you dancing with your partner? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
the single best way to avoid dementia. It's
Mm-hmm.
the are you taking a relaxation? What is
Mm-hmm.
the have you got together with your girlfriends over tea?
Yes.
Have you sat down for a stitch and bitch with your bestie? Like
Yes.
that's my favorite part of the longevity teachings.
And I want to say something that I've been exploring in the evolution of my work as somebody who comes from this science background where I can say, like, sleep impacts your microbiome, sleep impacts your hormones, right? You know what? Belonging also impacts your inflammatory genes. Being moved impacts your oxytocin, which helps with your hormones, right? Like, I love looking at how these different parts of being and living also do the physiological work we're looking to. It's that pharmacy within, it's what exists. So we can say, wait a minute, I know that being with family is a key to longevity, but my family doesn't live near me. So, what's important to me from that message?
Yeah.
And can I cultivate it in a way that is meaningful to me? And so, that I think is just this very rich exploration that we can each do for ourselves that isn't prescriptive. It's very personalized, going back to our conversations, but it's about how we live and embrace some of the things that also impact our longevity, our health, our healing, all the things.
Yeah. It's way more about what's on the inside already than it is about anything on the outside. So
Yes.
that's the wisdom of this episode. Thank you for
Yes.
delivering it.
Mm.
So, if people want to hear more about you or find out more about you, where can we do that? And please talk about where practitioners can go to
Yes.
learn your way of teaching,
Yeah,
please.
so if you head to andreanakayama.com, it'll lead you to all the different places on all the socials, Andrea Nakayama, LinkedIn, Instagram. Not so savvy on the TikTok yet, but hopefully getting there. But Andrea Nakayama, all the places, and at andreanakayama.com, it will lead you back to the Functional Nutrition Alliance, where I do spend the majority of my time training practitioners in the science and art of functional nutrition, of course, always weaving in the cultural competency and the understanding of the individual.
Mm, so important. Do you know, I have one question that I ask all my guests, and I'd love to pose it to you now. Have a little fun with it, please. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, my younger self. Well, I think that I had a lot of faith or this idea that I could control everything. And I think what I've learned over the years is that I can do me in an environment that's constantly going to be evolving and changing. And I don't know what's going to come up and arise. So I think I would tell her to chill out and, know thyself while you're on this gorgeous and difficult journey that is life.
Yeah, I love that.
Chill
Because
out,
chill out, chill.
sister.
Boo, sit down.
Seat, sister. Boo, just have a seat.
I love it. It's great wisdom. Control is an illusion, anyways, isn't it? Wish someone had taught me that earlier.
Yeah, I think people often think I'm a perfectionist because I'm a high performer, but I'm not afraid to put myself out there, try new things, fall on my face. I'm not a perfectionist. I do have high standards, and I think we have to allow ourselves the process of being uncomfortable. Even when I think about being a parent to an adult-ish, he's 24, he's still finding himself, but that brought up a whole bunch of new emotions and I don't get to control what he does or how that makes me feel. And every time those things come up, I just sit in that place of chaos and allow for it to be my teacher.
Mm. So, so important. Thank you for the dispensation of wisdom, deep wisdom today. Andrea Nakayama, thanks for coming to the show. The information and other content provided in this show, or in any linked materials, is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise or treatment. We are doctors, but we aren't your doctor. Seek your doctor's opinion. If you or any other person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical treatment. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have heard in this podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The opinions and views expressed on this page and in this show have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution. Thank you.